Hello and welcome to the Mindset Nebula, where we discuss the intersection of technology, design, and SAP. I'm Ethan Jewett, and with me today I've got Jonathan Bragg. Hey,
Hello.
John. Sarah Lewis.
Hey.
Hey, Sarah. And Soraya Diallo.
Hello.
Hello. All right, well, let's jump in and get started. We've got a bunch of topics today. We are going to cover Sapphire 2023. And I think we were all there, correct? All four of us.
Yeah.
That's kind of a new thing. Not a lot of people were there last year. We can talk about that a little bit. But yeah, we were all there in person. It was great event, great experience. And there's a lot to talk about. Let's just start with sort of like, what was the feeling of the event this year? So I don't know, who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Sarah, you were there for the first time, right?
Yeah, so it was my first Sapphire experience, so not a lot to compare it to except, past conferences from past lives for me. But, I thought people were pretty energetic, pretty excited to be in person. You saw instant networking happening, instant connections going on, overwhelming. It's felt like positivity, from most people. People were excited to engage with the sessions. They were excited to engage with the keynotes. So I thought it was great. I think people were really excited to be back together. There's a lot of, feeling of missing that connection over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I would add, I think it was quality over quantity. I know in the past, Sapphire has had much bigger turnout, except during the pandemic. But I felt like the content was more curated, even the number of booths. So I felt like you could tackle more in the 2-day period versus just having so much going on. I felt like it was actually tangible to be able to hit more booths and hit more sessions.
That was actually one thing that struck me as well, Soraya. It was the booths and the booth sizes. So you're used to, from what, 3 or 4 years ago, the Accenture booths and the PwC booths are these 2-story monoliths that are, a little bit scary to walk into. But this year it really seemed like everything was kind of, ground level, just kind of walk around, a lot of space. I wasn't there last year. I heard there was not as much attendance at all. I think there was maybe back to 15,000 or so people there, it felt like. And a lot of the keynotes were well attended. A lot of the sessions were really, really well attended.
Yeah, so I was there last year and it was weird. I think most people attended remotely last year. And yeah, it was it was much more crowded this year. Last year, I don't know what the exact numbers were, but last year was, I think, like 3, 4, or 5,000 people or something like that. And this year it was like there were significantly more people. It was obvious that there was a lot more energy on the show floor, a lot harder to get around in some places. I don't think it was as crowded as it was before COVID. So still kind of getting back to normal a little bit, but yeah, a lot more energy this year. Felt a lot more like sort of Sapphire of old, I guess, and that was fun. There was a lot going on.
Yeah, I did find it a little bit odd that there were some sessions that, like in the past, I always felt like SAP did really, really good pre-planning on what sessions were in what size of theater. And I think this year they just had a little bit of a difference in where people were going to go. So, in some of the sessions there would be, there was maybe a functional session on a topic with a customer versus a technical BTP session. There was a large theater for one and a pretty small theater for the other, and it seems like the crowd was flip-flopped a few times. And so maybe that was some of their learning experiences on, where the most popular topics were going to be this year.
Yeah, as a newcomer,
Yeah, definitely.
It was hard for me to fathom the old turnouts of 20,000, 30,000 that I kept hearing about when talking to people, because the sessions I attended were mostly standing room only, where you're crowded into the back trying to listen. They didn't have seats for everybody. So it seemed hard to fathom how it would be if it were double that attendance.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember back like 5 years ago. I think that they used to have a lot of sessions outside of the show floor. So they would go out to to session rooms up on the third floor or the second floor. And so so a lot of those sessions there was a much bigger space and much better sort of audio quality and audio equipment previously. Whereas I think this time there were a few sessions like that, but almost all the sessions were, I think, on the show floor this year. And so, that speaks to like the difference in attendance that you were talking about, Sarah, where so if you have 20,000, 30,000 people there, that's just not going to work.
Right.
But yeah, this year it kind of worked. I think maybe we can jump into, I'll switch things up because John of course is pulling forward topics, but let's jump into themes a little bit and talk about I think that the session flipping issue and the size of the location for the different sessions may speak to a little bit of something we observed with a little bit of a difference between SAP's perception of what the important themes are and the themes we were hearing about from customers and as we went around and talked with people. Maybe we can just start with some of sort of SAP's themes and then let's talk about some of the themes we heard from customers. What did we hear about from SAP to start out with from the very beginning of day one?
Clean core, and
yeah,
and AI. Those were the.
I know AI was so much in the air that like you forgot about it, that you've been indoctrinated, Serena, right?
Yes.
Like there was this strange 2-letter acronym I've never heard of before. What is this AI thing that everybody's talking about?
Yeah, there was a lot of like chat GPT basically. But then, I mean, there's sort of a bunch of different versions of AI, right? There's sort of like the traditional machine learning stuff, like GRIR matching and that kind of thing that SAP has been pushing for 5+ years. There was chat GPT in everything. Can we put a chat GPT button in this application? I think was the general concept. There was a lot of discussion of sort of process intelligence, Signavio, but melded with this sort of AI theme. What were your all takeaways from that? Did anything particularly stick out at you?
The interesting part for me was that coming into Sapphire, you're always wondering what the big announcement's going to be. And I think this year for me, I didn't have one because, they had announced DataSphere on its own, maybe 30 days before that. They had announced some of the generative AI things that they were working on. So they're kind of drip feeding that throughout the year leading up to this. So it was kind of just a lot of the same themes again, it felt like in the keynotes and things like that. So you hit AI a ton, you hit BTP a ton, you can run your business using BTP as a clean core methodology. And like all of those things are starting to become normal topics, I think, in 2023 now, versus just being here's a big bang Sapphire announcement that we're going after.
Yeah, I wasn't in all of the sessions and I didn't attend all the keynotes, but I know the first keynote, I was kind of surprised at some of the use cases for AI, especially with SAP being big in the manufacturing space and supply chain. A lot of their use cases were around like HR and FI, which a lot of SAP customers, of course, use those modules. But I attended a session and it was standing room only that was AI for supply chain, right? And I think, again, I didn't attend all of the sessions, but I was kind of surprised that they didn't speak more to the AI use cases for supply chain a little bit deeper and meatier, because I feel like we keep hearing the use cases for invoicing, and I've had customers directly say like we want something new. We want SAP to be able to demonstrate something beyond an invoice use case or an HR use case.
Yeah. it seems like there are a lot of opportunities there. I mean, like John, I know something we've talked about is this sort of like hands-free plant floor type of scenario where, just people who are working on like maintenance, like work orders and stuff like that, they're working with their hands on a machine or something like that. And, maybe there should be a way for them to interact with the computer without having to touch it, without having to take their gloves off. That kind of thing is somewhere where like that actually is chat. Like that would actually be a fantastic use case for ChatGPT. Whereas I think a lot of the use cases we were seeing could be very powerful. The sort of the editing and prose generation capabilities that it has can be really, really helpful. But some of the other scenarios we saw, like in that first keynote, where you're pulling something into Microsoft's Copilot or in Microsoft Teams, which is pretty lucky that SAP has now discontinued the Copilot product, because man, that would be confusing. But like a lot of the stuff that people in finance are doing, or approval processing and that kind of thing, a lot of companies are throwing that into chat interfaces. And I think there's been some actually compelling research that people don't want to interact with a computer via chat for that kind of thing. They want to push a button. Like, I don't want to talk to somebody to book a plane ticket if I can help it, right? I want to be able to go to Google Flights, search my tickets, find the one that works for me, click a button and buy it. I don't need to talk to somebody about it. And I think a lot of people have this perception about interacting with computers, where it's actually good to interact with a computer for a lot of stuff in a conventional way. And for other things, it's good to talk with people. And we need to be careful about how we're deploying chat for those purposes. So yeah, some interesting use cases though, definitely.
I mean, that's interesting. From one of the big takeaways that I took from going to a few of the AI sessions, where they were doing probably the same one that you were in, Soraya, around supply chain and transportation. They were doing some demos. And the main thing I took away was, yes, this has some machine learning on the back end, but what you're showing people is still the SAP GUI of old. Like you still have to take into account that there's a broader UX implication of what people actually want to see and what people want to interact with. And that piece, it doesn't seem like SAP is taken into account out of the box. They just want to say, yep, this is the screen, it's automated. We can do auto close of finance docs, or we can do freight order lookups on the fly. We can do supply chain warehouse tasks, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. That was another theme, John, right? That kind of got like squished into the AI theme, was the automation theme, where, I mean, clicking a button is not AI, right? But to some extent, that's what was happening a little bit in terms of the discussion. Like all those four things got grouped up into that 2-letter acronym, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense.
Made it feel a little buzzwordy.
Yeah, I mean, big surprise with AI, right? Another sort of theme that I saw in the conference, and like John, you said there was no big announcement from SAP, but I thought there was kind of an implicit announcement actually, which is really that SAP is actually finally transitioning into becoming a cloud-first company in some ways. And I mean that not just in terms of the way that its software is delivered. So all the demos were of SuccessFactors or S/4HANA Cloud or Ariba, and there wasn't that much in terms of on-prem in terms of demos. But the fact of the matter is that a huge amount of SAP's business and most of SAP's customers, at least the big ones, are on-premise still with their systems. But that doesn't mean that SAP can't transition into being a cloud company. I think like they need to transition their commercial models, and SAP is having some success with Rise, and and they introduced Grow now, and like that's the transition that really is going to matter for letting SAP become a cloud company. I think with that transition to a subscription model for its software with Rise. That hopefully will allow SAP to transition its customer touch point to more of a cloud focus. Because like if everybody's incentivized to do upfront, like you sell the thing and that's when you get that's when you get your reward. That's all people are going to focus on. But in cloud, we need to focus on like ongoing subscription revenue, right? And making sure customers are happy and using the product. And I think that may be very, very helpful.
Interestingly
So
enough,
we'll see.
Maybe I just didn't pay attention enough, Ethan, but I didn't see a lot of sessions on that very topic of taking on-prem to go to cloud. So, you know, a lot of the conversations I had with folks that were wandering the floor were, yeah, AI is great. BTP sounds awesome. I don't know how it applies to me, though. I don't know how it applies to my organization because we are on-prem. We feel so behind. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to take this to the next steps to try to get there, you know. And I think that resonated where a lot of the BTP 101 sessions were the heavily attended. You know, a lot of the introduction to were the heavily attended because people are not there yet with their organization. And even though they want to be, there's still so many steps in between. I think people were trying to struggle to figure out how to get there.
Yeah, I think it was kind of hidden in the tea leaves there a little bit of, you know, a lot of the clean core topics are, you know, how can we move this layer to the cloud? Or BTP is how do we abstract some of these things from on-prem to make sure that we can start to set this roadmap? And, you know, I always make the terrible joke of when, you know, we all can't wait until S4 becomes T5 and we can, you know, finally kill the on-premise conversation along the way. And how do we get there? What's the roadmap? How long is that going to take? Is it, you know, 2027 plus another 10 years, or hopefully it speeds up from there?
Yeah, I might be. Honestly, I may be getting mixed up with just the general conversational sort of topic versus what SAP was pushing. But man, there were a lot of people talking about Rise and moving on-prem to hyperscalers, like not S/4HANA Cloud, but S/4HANA Private Cloud was a big topic. Moving ERP without migrating to S/4HANA, so moving ERP to hyperscaler. To hyperscalers without migrating to S/4HANA was actually a fairly large topic, and I know a lot of customers are thinking about that because either they can't move because they're using AFS or something like that, the apparel and footwear system, or they just don't see the value proposition, which is I think something that more customers are starting to be able to see that if we move to S/4HANA, we actually will get something out of it, but I think that's still a difficult, still kind of a difficult discussion for a lot of customers.
For sure. And I think the bigger the customer, the harder that conversation, because it's going to be a massive, massive investment. And it's like, if it ain't broke, why fix it right now? And so what I saw was, the bigger the brand, they're kind of latent with that S4 migration because of the cost associated with it. And then, you know, maybe they've already started with a subsidiary or a specific market, and they're like, hey, yeah, it's great, it's good, but they're seeing marginal benefits. So
yeah.
And I hate to say it, but it feels like the large SIs, when they're transforming somebody to S4, they're still running off the 20-year-old playbook or the 10-year-old playbook of, here's how we got you to ECC. Now here's exactly how we're going to get you to S4. And their migration plan and their Activate methodology of doing that is the same as they would have done it before. So they're not taking the innovations into account. They're not taking BTP into account. They're not taking end-to-end Fiori first strategies into account. So it's like, how do we convince customers that that's where your savings are and that's where, you know, your path forward is, when you've been convinced that, okay, I have to just transform and get on the new hardware first, and then and only then can I actually start this path to success.
Yeah. I had a little different Sapphire than you guys did, but I spent a lot of time talking with partners, and especially sort of S4 specialist partners, S4 and BTP specialist partners, and Man, that from 4 years ago, things have really changed. I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, I think everybody was pretty much saying, um, go to S4, do Brownfield, do the upgrade path. And this year, it was pretty much don't do that. It was that if you do Brownfield, you are not going to be able to reap the benefits of S4. Was the basic message. It was go Greenfield. And do a migration rather than an upgrade. And so that at least in my mind, that was a big change in what I was hearing. I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, at Mindset, we don't do implementations or S4 upgrades. We work with partners to do that, but we see so many customers that do just what you said, John, where there's a brownfield upgrade and you basically just swap out the underneath part of it. And as far as your users are concerned, and as far as your business process is concerned, nothing really changes, except that your finance users lose a bunch of reports that they needed. And so, so I think that change is a big one in terms of the mindset that people are bringing to the implementations. I don't know if it's catching on with the big SIs and with customers, but in terms of like getting the most out of your S4 journey, that was what I was hearing this year, and it was different. That's for sure.
Yeah, and you just pointed out a benefit of using BTP for some of that, because you can change things in the background and still abstract and host things out in BTP, so that all those things don't have to change, and your change management doesn't have to do a lot of that. But yeah, at the same time, that really was the efforts. But yeah, I'm kind of curious what others found from their customer conversations as well. Like, did that kind of tie into where other customers were at that you talked to, or what were some of those conversations?
Go ahead.
Speak at once. Yeah, I mean, most of my conversations, I kind of knew going into Sapphire what we wanted to talk about or what we needed to talk about. But as far as like people that I was sitting next to at lunch that had no relationship with, they were very curious about BTP, but where do we start? We know that it's important because SAP has made it clear, with the booths and everything. And the sessions being very BTP centric, but it was, where do we even begin with exploring what is available? And I probably had 3 or 4 conversations that were centered on that.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
I think to even dilute further from there too is just it was interesting to talk to different personas that were attending, right? In terms of if you tackle something like BTP. So, one of the clients I talked with, she's the development leader, and she was trying to figure out what does BTP mean for her team and her responsibilities. And then you talk to broader levels of CIOs trying to expand that upward of what does BTP mean for my entire enterprise. And it's the same thing, right? But they're trying to figure out how it works from all these different angles. And that's such a different, such a big elephant to take on all in one, 2 days of conference sessions to try to figure out.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And I think mentioned in every single conversation I had with customers was, well, I need to see something, show me something. I need use cases. And I actually saw that shift from SAP a little bit as well, where they were talking a lot more about use cases to build up into that. I think that was a big piece of why BTP is now named BTP, because HANA Cloud Platform didn't mean anything. SAP Cloud Platform didn't mean anything. But now that it's about the business, now I have use cases that I could bring to how I'm using this technology. And that's kind of turned around to the customer to say, okay, show me a use case that provides value of something that gets developed on BTP that my users will really love. And that, like, tying all those pieces in together was the big key in what people wanted to see. I think they were, they've been hit so much with very specific BTP content that now they're like, okay, I get it. There's services out there. I can spin things up or I can turn things on and off. But their question of, well, what can I do with it? What is it? They want that, show me first, and then we'll figure out where our pain points are.
So John, our next podcast topic needs to be BTP use cases, I think, because we're not going to be able to cover them today. This is about Sapphire, not about BTP. But yeah, that was a huge topic of discussion. Where do I use BTP? Where does it make sense? Because it's clear that it doesn't always, right? And especially for customers that have, like most customers, have an existing hyperscaler strategy. We use AWS for a bunch of stuff. We use it for infrastructure. We use it for some application development. We use Azure for a bunch of stuff. We use it for Azure AD. We use it for Power BI. So given that, where do I use BTP? I think was really a huge question that I saw a lot of from customers. And there are some good answers to that too. which
Foreshadowing.
we can also talk about in a separate podcast. But yeah, it's certainly not the message, which I think SAP managed to stay away from a little bit more of this Sapphire. But previously the message was you use BTP for everything, right? And that's not a good message. It's not a message that anybody who is a mature IT organization is going to be like, yeah, that's right? And it doesn't build a lot of trust because it's just not the right answer for most customers. So yeah, that was big. Another one that I saw was, how do I get ready for S4, right? I mean, a huge number of SAP customers are not on S4, and 2027, like you said, John, is end of standard maintenance, and 2030 is end of extended maintenance, and it's coming up fast. So customers are starting to feel the pressure, like we need to get ready for S4. How do I do that? So that was another big question that was floating around. How about what customers were asking about versus SAP? So we talked, that was all kind of mixed up, right? But SAP was like AI. They were talking about BTP a ton. They were talking about clean core. Customers, can we just run down their themes really quick? So we heard supply chain. What else?
I heard a lot around, we just implemented S4. We still have no Fiori. Our end users are screaming, why am I using this system that still looks like it's from 1990? Mm-hmm. That was one
of the basics of migration, right? Yeah.
Right. And then, you can speak about AI until we're all blue in the face here, but we're still trying to get a great architectural foundation set up for the future. So how do we actually put that together? Those are my two big kind of more technical pieces that I heard.
And I would second that. Just still around user experience, right? So going back to basics. So AI and everything is cool, and they want to explore it, but it's, can we get the basics out of the way, which is a more refreshing user experience for our end users.
And to dovetail from your previous point, Ethan, about Brownfield versus Greenfield, lots of conversations at Sapphire about making it a business transformation, but a lot of clients saying they can't get the internal support to do that, where they're just saying, we've decided just to do a technical shift. That's the only thing we can get support for. It's the only thing we can get budget for. So we have to do that first, and then we can hopefully try to figure out some of the, additional add-ons later. But right now we're being, cornered into only doing a lift and shift model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And
what do we recommend for customers in that situation?
I always push back.
John, what do you do? What do you do?
I hate that answer just because it feels like then the business is not actually looking at a CEO's or an entire business's actual priorities. So everybody has, a year-by-year plan or a 5-year vision or a 10-year vision. What are you trying to map to? And then how can you use your systems to be able to support that? Like, it just feels to me like they're not taking a business case seriously. Like they're just saying, yep, we need to upgrade because 2027 is coming up soon. Instead of saying, look, we have these 10 different business priorities. I see between the innovations and AI and BTP things that we could possibly do based on what a few of these other companies have done. These hit 3 of our top business priorities. Let's map those together and make sure that we know that we're going to have savings. And that's where Serenas comes in, or Signavio, or any of those process intelligence tools to be able to just start to map those things out, to then map a transformation that actually has value versus just we're moving it into the cloud because it's going to save a few dollars of hardware cost. That is a 100% IT answer and not a company answer. But that's a soapbox.
So your read is you're upset. No, let's get into this. It's like Jerry Springer mindset. So I mean, but it's sort of like a fail. Not always, but sometimes that's going to be sort of a failure from the IT side to put forward a vision. It's kind of what I'm hearing here.
Or
and
to make it make sense for the business team. So I hear a lot, we just implemented SAP 6 years ago, which seems like a long time, but their logic is our business teams are still reeling from that implementation. How do I get them on board to do another major migration? Even if it's supposedly so much better for them.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of times they're not even considering the future business users, right? So just the shift in what younger business users are going to demand, right? And so it's, hey, I'm getting input from this person that's already familiar with ECC and they're comfortable with it, but people don't stay in jobs for 20 years anymore. And so you have to have a system that is more intuitive and expect there to be turnover no matter what industry you're in, and plan for that better, right? And not make it just such an uphill journey for the person who's utilizing the system.
Yeah.
And I think we're probably just getting to the crux of that pain point, Serena, where companies are starting to feel that talent gap, talent demand. The age, the SAP user group is aging out, they're retiring, and the new workforce is here. And companies haven't felt that pain yet, where they've been told, right, if you don't have the optimal user experience, people aren't going to want to work here. If you don't have this, you're not going to maintain and keep talent and retain them. But I don't think they've truly felt that pain until just now they're actually starting to, where it's becoming more of an issue that's being actually addressed and listened to.
It's like, am I going to learn SAP GUI or am I going to make videos on TikTok?
I mean, if I can make 5 million a day on TikTok.
Yeah.
New business.
I don't know what you're talking about, people. Like I've never met a new employee who wasn't excited to learn T codes. All right. Well, let's talk about. I mean, there is one very important topic we have to cover, which is well, there are actually two. So who saw the keynote with Serena? I missed it, unfortunately. Yeah, Serena Williams joined us. How was it? Like, what did she have to say? Why was she there? Maybe that's the question.
I'll say, first of all, anybody, wait, Sarah, maybe you told me this, she's 7 months pregnant? Anybody who is willing to still take a stage and talk in front of a huge global audience at 7 months pregnant, kudos. Like that's awesome.
Well, she is considered a GOAT of sports, not just tennis, but of whether we're talking about male or female athletes, she is top ranked, and so it was very special to be able to see her in person. It was a session where I saw it was like Black Friday. People were lined up an hour in advance, and they were just bum rushing. But yeah, so she was there. Go ahead.
No, please.
Yeah, I mean, she, first of all, Julia White, who I think is head of marketing of SAP, she was amazing. I ran into her at celebration night and I said, oh my gosh, you are like a Toastmasters dream. She was so polished, and it was a keynote, but it was more interview style, right? And I think Julia led the session very well. So Serena talked about her successes on the court, and then they ventured into Serena Ventures, which is Serena Williams venture capital company, where she invests in minority and women-owned businesses primarily, because she saw that that was an underserved market. And I think it was 2%. There was different figures that were thrown out, but less than 2% of VC money goes to minority females.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Julia's amazing.
As a girl who played varsity tennis growing up, I was obviously stoked to see Serena just in person, someone who's watched her my entire life growing up and, modeled after her. But I think, it's always a big name at these conferences to throw out to try to grab attention, right? But I think there's a lot that they tried to attach from her grit, her resilience, her fortitude to continue off the tennis court and into the world of business, that they tried, pull back and, give motivation and a feel good, rah, rah end of the conference moment to all of the business attendees. I think it resonated really well with people. I think, it was a true feel good moment to end the conference on, where people are kind of overwhelmed. They're feeling dizzy from all the different conversations over the last 2 days. And you give them this piece of like true motivation and energy and someone to aspire after. And, I think it did the trick that they were looking to do.
Yeah. And she's got a lot of credibility. I mean, both in terms of just knowing about performance from her sports career, but also business. I mean, she ran a business empire around her brand when she was in sports, and then she's doing a ton of other stuff now. So
I very much appreciated her realness in some of her comments, and in some of the things that she said. It was around just people that she had talked to saying that they're the best of something. Like, well, obviously not, otherwise you would be number one in the world like I was. Like, dang, yeah, that's exactly right. You got to go for it. You got to actually perform to be able to say that.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I
cool.
appreciated that realness too, but there was something that she said that she was like, look, I knew that I was never going to fit in just by where I was born and what I look like, in this world. Therefore, I never tried to fit in. And I'm like, how refreshing is that you have been able to basically live your truth and just kind of be free to be who you are. And I think that served her well on and off the court.
Served.
Pun intended.
Nice.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for filling me in. I am going to go back and try to watch, but it takes time. All right, last topic. What did we all do, or what did you all do? I should say. I had to leave, but what did you all do Wednesday night? There was a celebration night of sorts.
There was.
What was the review? I mean, was it any good? Did you go see Usher?
I mean, you just missed it, Ethan. I guess you had to be there.
I know. All right. There's no recording of this one. I can watch the recording of Serena, but celebration night is like, it's a big mystery. So, yeah, Universal Orlando again, right? And then the Usher concert. Okay.
Yeah,
but
so
not a lot to
like
say about it.
A portion of the theme park closed off, to the general public. So it was just Sapphire attendees. I didn't have any of the food, but the food looked amazing in terms of they had the different vendors open. So your go-tos of like giant pretzels and all the fun, amusement park treats were all there for you to go and grab, and then drinks, of course, and intermingling. And it seemed like a good place where people were just kind of letting loose after a couple of busy days. I had like 24,000 steps after that day, something like that. So just, I don't know if it was a good idea to have people just like wandering all over.
Exhausted.
My feet were tired.
Yeah, same. So, I had Achilles surgery a couple months ago and my
I don't know how you
feet
did
is
it.
so swollen.
I don't know
But
how you
no, it
did it.
was it was good. And it's, good to see customers and, CIOs and, just loosening up and having a good time. And I did go see Usher. I'm afraid of heights, so I didn't do the rides, but I did go see Usher, and I'm a Southerner. I live in Alabama. I lived in Atlanta, and he's from, the A. So it was fun. It was fun. And you just have such a hodgepodge of people, right, that are SAP users, and it's just nice to see them in that way, dancing and singing along.
I feel like somehow during that, like, what, 2 or 3 hours, I met more past colleagues and customers in line waiting for rides than I did walking around the conference for 2 days. And I don't know how they all ended up there versus like the sessions that we went to, but it was very, very interesting. It was cool.
Great. All right. Well, I think with that we can wrap up. Thank you so much for joining everybody and giving your thoughts on Sapphire.
Well,
think it
I
was a
have a
great
question
experience.
for you, Ethan.
Yeah.
Who would you want the
Uh-oh.
entertainment? Who would you want? Maybe SAP will hear this. Who do you want the entertainment to be next year?
Good question. Well, I didn't leave because of Usher, so I should be clear about that. That's a really good question. I don't know. I'm trying to think back to previous ones that I haven't skipped, and I'm drawing a blank. So yeah, I mean, I think it's good that they've. I'm not going to answer your question, to be clear. But I think that it's good that
there's not a band that you like that you would want the SAP world to.
Look, if they could get U2 or something, that would be pretty cool. I just don't think it's going to happen.
No, they've had U2 before.
Yeah, they did.
At something. It might have been FCOM.
That was a long time ago, though. I think. Yeah. Oh, anyway, yeah. Like, I mean, but I think I was gonna say, like, I think it's good that they've been branching out for a while. I mean, there was a time when it was all sort of like, 80s rock bands, and that's not great. So, yeah,
I want Dolly Parton. So.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah. I would be there for that. I would stay. I would have changed my ticket.
Sorry, kiddos. Dad's got to see Dolly.
Exactly. All right. Well, any last words?
Namaste.
All right. Thank you so much for joining and giving your thoughts.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time on Mindset Nebula.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.